Thanks ever so much, Neil. Hello, everybody. Thank you ever so much for coming to this session today. It's going to be a whistle-stop tour, and I do work quite pacey, so do chuck in your questions and we'll answer them in the end, but I do sort of work at quite a pace. But what I do is all practical. And that's come from my 20 years experience as a sales and marketing and a managing director of businesses that I've helped grow across the time. So I currently run a business consultancy organisation. We have 12 consultants that work in the hub, and we help businesses with lots of different types of business problems to grow, or in these times transform into the organisation that they want to be. I'm an AGP coach, and I'm also the trustee and deputy chair of the Institute of Leadership and Management, and I'm a non-exec director of Swim Wales. So hopefully that gives me some insight into this subject. But my whole raison d'etre is to help organisations and individuals be the best version of themselves they can be, and there's no greater time for that than at the moment, when we're all challenged to solve problems, think on our feet, change our businesses to look at what's happening in this uncertain time. And I think moving on to our sort of, now you see it's not working now. Why is it not working? There you go. The agenda for today, we're going to look at the current situation. We're going to look at what technically resilience is, and then how you can improve resilience in your business through leadership and build the resilience, and then some personal things you can do for positivity. But let's be honest, it's about being practical. It's about helping you as business leaders get through this volatile, uncertain, complex time. And, there's lots of different definitions of resilience. I'll let you read that on the screen. But for me, resilience is that ability for an organisation to survive and prosper. And you might say, well, actually, we've all done very well. If we're still in business after this situation, after the uncertainty of COVID, then actually we are resilient, because many people haven't. But actually, I think it's more than that. I think it's about how you build resilience. Is about building the type of business that can weather any storm, because, it might be the recession that's coming, or the depression that's coming, or the next thing. We just don't know, do we? So the thing we need to look at is how your businesses and your teams are focused. So the current situation, we know that the current crisis has really fundamentally focused most people on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's put people in the bottom two areas, or at the beginning put people in the bottom two areas of understanding psychological needs and the safety needs. And so your team were probably very interested in those areas. Am I going to have a job? Can I feed my family? Am I going to be healthy? Hi, Catherine. How am I going to be healthy? Are my family going to be okay? And that really probably for some people has changed. There's a saying going around, wasn't there, that actually we're all in the same storm, but we're in very different boats. So if you've lost your job, that's one experience. If you've been really busy and your organisation has tripled growth because you're an online company, fantastic. If you've got your kids at home, you're having to homeschool, God help you. I don't know how you're doing it. I don't have kids. I can't imagine what that must have been like. But we've all been in different situations. And so the current situation, we might be moving out of the bottom two tiers of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but actually we're still not quite in the top three categories. And you may or may not know, a bit of theory to start with, may or may not know Rylett-Jones change curve. But the question you have to ask ourselves is, where is your team at the moment? Has your team got through the depression, the testing time, and the accepting of the change? Or actually, are they still in a valley of despair? And actually, will they continue to go through this curve? So the first thing with any resilience is you have to identify where your current teams are, where your current team members are. And that's within the change curve, but also obviously you're wanting to understand them as individuals. Where is their motivation? How have they been affected by this current situation? As I say, we're on very different boats. You'll have some in your team that are flying and loving working from home on their own because they like the isolation and they've got nobody else at home and they've got a nice office and all those kind of things. You'll have other people, I'm sure, that'll be pulling their hair out because the kids are running around and they can't quite get the internet working and they've got 3 teenagers that are all on Fortnite and all those kind of things. So individually understanding not just your business, but where your team members are is really important. You can use this curve to look at that. But as I said, once you understand where your team are, you need to define the kind of definition that you want. So it's the capacity to recover and spring back into shape. We're building capacity. So that's what my presentation is focusing on today, is how you can do that. It's not about blind optimism that, yeah, it's going to be fine. Yeah, great, lovely. None of that. It's about actually steps you can take to build resilience into your teams so that whatever happens in the future post-COVID, you're actually a stronger organisation. And that starts in every aspect of the business. There is a Harvard Business Review report that talks about the 4 common traits. The link's on the presentation. You'll get a copy of the slides. 4 common traits of teams that work well together in uncertain times, and resilient teams. They complete tasks together. And what we mean by that is it's that whole mentality of the world against us. And you've probably seen it the first few weeks of COVID. It was like, okay, what's going on? Right, we need to come out fighting here. We need to decide what we're going to do. And everybody gathered together, and we're in this together. Boris was there on his podium. We'll do this as a country. It's that whole sort of, come on, we'll fight them on the beaches mentality. But not only do they want to complete the task together, but actually they have a common view of what that means. So they understand each other's roles. They understand how the business works. They understand a number of the cultural aspects of the business. They have the same view of what it means to work together as a team. They also have the ability to take existing knowledge, to take the situation and to reconfigure those ideas and improvise to solve the problems. So we saw lots of that. You know, they say crisis is the mother of all invention. We saw lots of that at the beginning of the crisis. People were doing lots of different things they'd never done before because they were able to improvise, switch their productivity around. I know a number of companies changed what they were manufacturing to manufacture something else and made really good gains in markets they weren't in before. And finally, common traits of resilient teams is they have psychological safety. This is about the ability to think in a safe space, to speak in a safe space, and to trust each other. That if they say something that they're worried about, if they say something not quite right, that it's okay because the teammates have got their back. And that's about the trust equation. Sorry about the image here, but I wanted to make it as big as I could. The trust equation, if you've not seen this before, people that know me, I go on about this all the time, but the trust equation is really interesting. Think of all the relationships you've got. Teams, on the foundations of all teams, you have to trust your team members. And that means you have to see credibility in them. They have to be reliable, and you have to have a good relationship. That's what the intimacy bit is. And then they have to put the team above themselves. So they're not very self-orientated. And if you think of all the relationships you've got, the ones that are brilliant, they'll have credibility, reliability, and you have a good relationship with them. And they probably put you in front of themselves. But actually those ones that are maybe not as strong, they will either have a problem with credibility, you might not have the right relationship, you might have not spent enough time with them, or maybe they're just not reliable, or they're putting themselves in front of the business. You know those people in your teams. So if it's one of the things you can think about with regards to, remember, resilient teams have to have these 4 elements, and trust is one of those elements. So one of the things you can do to identify where your team are at the moment is to look at the credibility, reliability, and intimacy of your relationship with the team, or the business's relationship with the team, or the team member's relationship with the business. Look at it that way and think, do we have a trusting relationship? Do you think they feel safe? Because that's one of the building blocks of the equation. Okay, so you're probably aware of the 3 C's of change. The Centre of Creative Leadership did this many years ago. It's about communicating change, collaborating in change, and then committing to the change. A few years after that, that was changed to the 5 C's. So you have to be confident in it, you have to have commitment, communication, you collaborate, and you celebrate that change. And that's showing the strength and the competency of the business. I think we've actually gone to 7 C's of change, and the 2 additional ones that I think, particularly in times of uncertainty, is clarity needs to be added. You need to be clear with your teams. They need to understand what is happening. You need to be clear about the direction of travel you're going in. And then also you need to challenge and coach. So I've put a couple more C's into the change. And we're going to go through some of these practical elements with regards to helping your team build resilience through change. It all starts with you, okay? You need to organise your response. You are the key in building a resilient team. They need slightly more direction in times of uncertainty, and that means you have to give that direction as the leader. So you need to take a bit of control back from them. So some teams don't, that how much control you need to take back from the team is obviously individual by company, but you need to and you probably did at the beginning, you probably had to start telling people what to do at the beginning of the crisis. But in a post-COVID world, in building resilience, if you want them to build resilience, you might have to take a bit more of a steer on that again. And it's a time to be really calm, really assured, and a bit optimistic, not blind optimistic, but a bit optimistic. So how can you do this? So practically, be decisive, be the buffer, be persistent in your messaging, make sure you're thinking about all the relevant information you've got, and then make sure you're watching your language. So try to, as a leadership team, try to make sure that actually if any of you are just being slightly negative, it will come across in your language, potentially even your body language. But have a look at that and make sure you are exuding the confidence. And that, whether it's any crisis, post-crisis, in crisis, doesn't matter, you need to organise your response. Now, if you think about the leaders we've had in times of crisis, I'm not sure the leaders we've got at the moment in this crisis are good examples, but let's take a war, let's take Churchill. He was a great leader in a crisis. And so how did he show that confidence? How was he able to organise us and to give confidence to people? It will be in what he said, how he said it, and those kind of things. So that's what I'm saying about watch your language and make sure you are focused. The next leadership trait is purpose. In any time of crisis and building a more resilient team, the more you can build their understanding of why you do what you do, it will build layers and layers and layers of resilience. Because if you understand that you're changing the world, or you're making life better for a group of underrepresented people, or because I know some of the people here, you're making, people's living standards better if you're working with helping people aiding independent living and care homes. If you know why you're doing that and it's got a real impact on people's life, then that helps you build resilience. So one of the things as a leader is I would always say that you have to be the chief vision officer. Many people will know Simon Sinek. I'm a great believer in some of the things he does. And he did this actually about 12, 13 years ago. This first came out, the Golden Circle. But as a leader, you have to constantly be preaching the vision of the organisation, because every single person has to somehow tap into that DNA. So you need to be constantly reminding them of the vision of the organisation, but more importantly, their impact on that vision. So it's okay if you have a vision of, let's say, changing sustainability in the world. You've got a vision around that. That's great. But if your team don't understand it or don't get it or are not really interested in it, then they're not going to come out at 3 a.m. on a Christmas morning to do X, Y, and Z for you. So you have to take that vision and align your team with that vision and get them to understand their personal impact on that vision or their personal why to be related to the company. Once you've done that, you need to always be monitoring back and always communicating back the positive impact they've had on that vision. And Terry Leahy from Tesco's, ex-chief exec of Tesco's, said he spent 7 years going around every single Tesco stores, and you can imagine there's, I think, something like 3,500, 4,000, 5,000 of them. And he said the same thing for 7 years about the vision of Tesco's and what they were trying to do. And he said when he started hearing it back after 7 years, he knew he'd sort of got there in terms of the vision of the organisation. So your job as a leader is to make sure you are talking to your team about the vision. The what you do, let's take the crisis. The vision of your organisation might stay the same, but how you do it and the what you do, the mission, might change because it has to get to the end goal of the vision. So keep reminding them of the vision more than the what you do. Okay, so your team alignment is the real issue here, and it's core to making sure that the business can be resilient. Once you've got that alignment, it's about keeping them focused and focused on the right things. So in the crisis, it was focused on getting the business up and running again. It was focused on potentially maximising what needed to happen. It was focusing on keeping people safe. There was lots of things you're probably focused on in that immediate sense. Post-COVID, it could be actually, actually, how do we keep that innovation going? How do we keep the focus on the things that are important for us to make the changes we need to do? So what decisions are you going to make, and how important are the organisation that you can focus on that gives you the long-term benefits for the organisation? So make sure, more importantly, that you focus on the goals and the day-to-day processing of the operations to get you to your goals. So resilient organisations work as a team, and they focus on the same thing. The solutions they come up with, they'll improvise and all that kind of stuff, but they'll focus together on the teamwork they have to do, and they're focused on getting that thing achieved. So in moments of crisis or uncertainty, building resilience is about keeping a goal, keeping the operation focused on moving forward. You set the direction as a leader, you keep everybody on course. So have you got numbers that you follow? Do you have OKRs, objectives, key results, or do you have KPIs? Lots of different acronyms for these things. But what single number do you focus on? What's your version of the truth of that number? Your job as leaders is to keep them focused, and as teams, it's then to always be focused on the one number. Once you've got them focused, it's about making sure that they're working in the right way. And that's about going for the value of the relationship, working in the right way. It's about finding that shared value. So taking them from knowing about the situation to understanding the situation to trusting that as leaders you've got their back is really important. And again, we talked about trust previously. But we want to make sure that as teams, they value each other. They value that one version of a team. They value that focus on the purpose of the vision of the organisation. So working on the intimacy and the relationship between the team and between yourself as a leader and the team would be important. You want to take them from being unfamiliar from you to being really trusting in you. And any time that moves, you need to spend the effort in bringing it back to where it needs to be. So that's about connecting with people. I'll let you read the slides there, but really, some organisations have had a problem post-COVID with resilience because at the beginning they were doing lots of activities to check in with their team, coffee mornings, bingo team, Zoom calls, lots of different, sending them parcels from Amazon, having fun. Everybody was checking in all the time. But actually, 12 months, 15 months later, are we still doing that level of support? We're still maybe not in an office. We're still maybe not seeing many people as much as we were. So are you giving your teams a chance to check in? Are they checking in on each other? Are you creating opportunities for them to question, for them to speak up? Are you sending your internal messages out as much as you send your external messages out? Can you create moments of water cooler sort of conversation? It's easy, isn't it, when you're in an office and you overhear somebody saying XYZ, you can just chip in. But actually, when you're working outside an office and you're all working from different places, that's not as hard. One of my clients, a really interesting way of doing this, decided they would have team days. So one of my clients has a team day. If you're in team A, that's Mondays, you work with Zoom on. So they have two screens set up, Zoom's on one screen with the video on, and you're working on your other screen, and you can hear somebody say something. It's like, oh yeah, I've done something about that. And they've tried to create the connection. They don't do it for long, it's only an hour, but that just means that you're in the room, there's other people in the room, it feels like you're not working on your own, and it can create some interjections between the team. So make sure you try and create some of that sort of dynamic creation between them. And then obviously connection is all about communication, but I'm not going to go into that today. That's another workshop, but you know the importance of communication. So connection, collaboration is important, and connection leads to collaboration. And this is about giving your teams and stakeholders the opportunity to work on projects together, because we said that teams that are resilient are able to complete things, they work together as a team, and they are able to improvise. So solving problems is important. So collaboration helps you get some quick wins. It helps you to continue to improve your intimacy in relationships. It helps you to understand how the team dynamic works. So creating projects, creating buddying systems, mentoring, creating ways of people of working together so they can understand each other's value is a reason to collaborate. Also, you might find amazing solutions to problems that you've not found before. So there's always lots of positive in collaboration. Collaboration could also be used to move away from crisis management. What you want to do within resilience is move away from being in crisis as the standard mode of operating. At the moment, we're still in the crisis really, and so we've all become used to working in a certain way, but we can't continue that way forever. I'm not talking about location here, I'm talking about mentality and pace and the way you work. So you could use collaboration to bring in new projects that are not about crisis. They might be linked somehow, but you don't position it that way in your team. And then it takes you out of working in crisis. So just actually moving somebody to think about a new idea or a new challenge that's not related to what's happening at the moment might help them think, well, that was just a bit of respite. And that also with collaboration gives accountability. And Daniel Pink in his book called Drive talks about the number one driver for motivation and getting people to feel like they're doing something is progression. So accountability for doing something and progressing something forward as an individual will keep me more motivated and thus keep me more positive and resilient. Leadership is also the final two final points in leadership and is coaching. And I'm a coach, so I really believe in coaching. You all know the GROW model. I don't need to talk you through that, but there's the visual there if you're interested. But why is coaching so important in this time? Well, first of all, coaching is a physical thing. You have to be with somebody, you have to talk to somebody, you have to understand their position. It's about helping them become a better version of themselves, helping them making decisions. So it's about questioning. So it helps you develop the relationship, that intimacy. It also helps you understand where they currently are. So that assessment of how resilient they are is in the GROW model, because you have to say, what's our goals? What's our current reality? How are you feeling about that? Why would that be the case? There are lots of questions you can help. Coaching also helps them in a not critical way, a non-challenging way, to reset their mindset, and they are in control. They are, they have a little bit of control on something. So they can learn from the current situation, and you can take them by the hand and you can coach them and lead them more than actually being critical. And if we're in a crisis mode, we're trying our best, we're pushing everything as hard as we can, but occasionally a couple of things go wrong, the last thing they want to know is to hear about a criticism. But if you coach them through the situation, you develop the right relationship with them, they figure out that there's something wrong, they figure out what the root cause is of the problem, then that can have a much more positive effect because they feel like they're growing, they feel like they're learning and moving forward. And then finally, in terms of leadership, resilience, we do need to celebrate the small things, the big things. The team need to keep a scorecard of the successes. And again, at the beginning, we probably patted ourselves on the back for lots of these things, but how much of that are we doing now? So I suggest to a number of my clients who wanted practical things here, a number of my clients to keep success journals, ask the team each week to put one thing down that they think has been a fantastic achievement. I know somebody on this call has got a whole process at the moment where they ask their team a question every day, and it's Thankful Thursdays and Thankful Thursdays and wish I'd thought of that Wednesdays, so they're trying to celebrate their colleagues and build everybody up in terms of, do you know what, this is tough, but we're doing really well. And these are all the great things we've done. And this is a success here. And this is a success here. As leaders, try and catch somebody doing something really positive. The more you can catch good practice, the more you can celebrate that. You probably know the stats. I know there's some HR people on here. I think it's 7 things at least, if not 10 things to 1 in terms of positive to negative. So try and do more of the positive. And when times of stuff we forget, that's why as leaders, we need to watch our language, watch the negativity, and make sure we're focusing on the positive. And ask the team, get the team to do it. You don't have to do all of this, and you can help get them to celebrate each other as well as the focus. So to recap, I've done this really quickly. Hopefully, I've got 3 slides left, Neil. So hopefully that'll be okay for my 5 minutes. Great. You need to, as a leader, assume responsibility and control how you respond to the situation. Now, we may be coming to the end of one phase of this crisis, but as I said at the beginning, the world is really uncertain. There's going to be something else come down the road quite shortly, I'm sure, in terms of inflation or recession or depression, or there'll be something else. And it might not be on a world scale. It might be just to your company. The government might say that some, building near you has to come down and they're one of your biggest suppliers. So we need to be ready for the next thing. So controlling how we respond as leaders is really important. Continue to look at that long-term picture, though. Continue with your risk registers, continue with understanding where the uncertainty might be with your business, continue modelling, continue planning, make sure you've got your cash flow sorted out, make sure you've got your staff recruitment succession plan sorted out, because there might be somebody leave your organisation tomorrow that's really important. Well, that will set you into another crisis. So post-COVID or whatever, it doesn't matter. Resilient teams have plans, they understand what's coming down long term. Work with purpose and make sure you're constantly talking to your team about the purpose of the organisation, because unless you do it constantly, they will slightly veer off from the vision. So you need to keep pulling them back. If you imagine it like a harbour, you're in a boat and the boat is tethered to a buoy. And what you want to do is keep pulling them back to the harbour. The boat needs to come back to the harbour all the time, the safe harbour. The vision of the company is a safe harbour. And they'll go out in their boat every day doing their work, on Zoom or in their office or at home. And you need to keep bringing them back to the vision of the organisation. Reset the mindset. Let's not moan and groan about it. Let's be positive. Let's celebrate. Let's remind the team why you're in this and the impact of their work. They need to see progression, they need to have accountability, and they need to feel like they're getting somewhere, and that will build a lot of motivation and resilience. Solve problems, so improvise, get them to work on a collaboration or a problem that's nothing to do with the issue, the current crisis, but will help the business in the long term. That will give them motivation as well. Visualize the positive outcome. Talk to people about what it's going to be like when they get their freedom. Talk about what's going to be like in 2 years' time. And when we get over this growth hump, this is what the future is going to be. I can see that. I know we can get there. That's the kind of language and positivity you need. Have fun and play and celebrate the successes. Now, that's the team resilience recap. I just wanted to put something in about positivity in my last 2 slides. So there is a study called positive psychology, which is a study of having a good life. And it's about making life worth living. So I think the whole work-life balance has gone out the window now. With our phones, we're 24/7 connected. I think the modern term is work-life harmony. More than it is balance, because you're never going to get it quite in balance, I don't think, these days. But we can get a harmony and have an appropriate approach to being positive. So here are some practical things that the study of positive psychology say you should do or can do to make your life just a little bit more positive. And if anybody knows me, and you put it in the chat maybe, but if anybody knows me, they say this is some of the stuff that I just take for granted. I didn't realise that this was a sort of a thing. And many of these things on here you'll do. How many times do you walk down the street and smile at somebody and they smile back, and how does that make you feel? If people smile at you or compliment you or give you a piece of feedback that's really positive, it makes you feel like you're on top of the world. When was the last time you did something for somebody? Never forget a time I was in London in a coffee shop. I had to go to the Indian embassy for a visa, and I had to go and wait for a few hours. So I went to a coffee shop around the corner, chap next to me doing the same thing. We ended up chatting, and he said, "Oh, I've got my appointment. Got to go." Great. And as he left, he wandered off. I came and kept drinking my cup of tea, and realised he'd left his bag under the table with his passport in it. And we'd been chatting, and he was telling me where he'd gone. So I literally packed my stuff up, took his bag, and ran down to the embassy he was going to. It was a Russian embassy he was going to, and gave him his passport back. Now, I felt like Superwoman for the whole day. I'd basically saved his bacon because he was going to the Russian ambassador's place to get some visa to go to Russia, and he wouldn't have been able to do that without his passport. Yeah, I did something nice and saved the day. It makes you feel amazing. How often do you talk to yourself in a positive way, or do you often talk to yourself in a negative way? So remember, think about what you are saying to yourself. I often say I can't write. Well, that's really negative, isn't it? I can write. I do know a bit of English. I might not be the best person at it, and I might not be a very effective grammatic person. I might not know my semicolons from my colons or my commas from my exclamation marks, but I can write and I can communicate. So actually saying I can't is not positive, is it? It's a negative self-talk. You could do lots of other things here that I suppose my favourite is being outdoors at the moment, enjoying the sunshine. It always makes me smile more. And doing things for others is a big thing for me. I get a lot of positive reinforcement from making other people smile and seeing what they do. So there are some things there that you can, there's plenty of others I'm sure you can think of, but there's some practical things you can do to be more positive. So just a final recap. Hopefully we've talked about some additional things that you might do with your team and how to look at your team's mindset. The 4 things that are important around team resilience are having a can-do attitude. We'll do it. We're in this together. That they have the same vision of teamwork that the business has, and they understand each other's roles and responsibilities. That they're able to improvise and have problem-solving freedom to come up with the solution and the innovation to the problem and solve the problem. And then finally, they feel safe and they trust each other to be able to be open and to value each other's position. Your role is vital. Leadership plays a main role, obviously, in this, and it's your sort of it's your responsibility to take the lead on making sure that your team are in the right place. And then hopefully you can then take that with some of the positive mindset sort of actions and the practical aspects of being positive in the workplace more than negative to help your team get there in the end. So there you go. Resilience. It's not about how hard you punch. It's about getting hit and getting back up. Rocky Balboa says, for those of you that like Rocky.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nicola. That was great. And like you say, there's a lot in there. And did I hear you say you're happy to share the slides?
Yeah, I'll show the slides. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we'll get those circulated to everyone who attended today. Yeah, it was quite interesting for me. Oh, by the way, if anyone has any questions, pop them in the chat. There's a few comments here I'll be reading through very shortly. One thing that stood out for me was you talked briefly about opportunities for control and, anxiety, as we're all kind of experiencing over the last year. I mean, anxiety is defined by lack of control, that sense of lack of control. And it's interesting for me, both as sort of someone who's self-employed, but also as a leader, looking at how do I give people those opportunities for a sense of control? Control is what reduces anxiety. It's what gives people a sense of certainty. And that, I think there's obviously a huge amount of uncertainty about the future for a lot of people and for a lot of reasons. But one thing Laura has mentioned with the conveyancing business is, her team are exhausted. They've been homeschooling, but also the conveyancing, for those of you who are not in the process of buying or selling a house, has been particularly difficult recently because there's been a massive housing boom as everyone's kind of readjusting to COVID, but also there's been a stamp duty holiday. So everyone's been trying to buy and sell to get under this particular deadline, which is the end of this month, I think. So they're obviously exhausted, and their bond as a team is perhaps been impacted. And she's saying now that people aren't just questioning whether they'll have a job in 6 months' time. They're more questioning about whether they want to stay in the industry at all. And I think that's probably shows Laura in a good light, the fact that her team are willing to share that with her, the fact that they're willing, I think if your employees are willing to share with you that they are questioning their future in an industry, that's them being open and honest with you. But what would you say to Laura about how to deal with those kind of concerns from staff? The exhaustion, the bond as a team, and just question if this is what they want to do anymore. I think we've all had those thoughts at various points over the years. Is this what I want to spend the next 10, 20, 30 years they want to spend doing?
I think I'm a great believer in tackling things in a number of different ways and then seeing how it all sort of merges together and bubbles in my thought process. So I think the first thing I'd do is go back to the why. You know, why did they come to this industry in the first place, and what is it that they love doing every single day, and what is it about working in the team and with Laura that they love doing every day. So let's remind them of the thing that they really love doing, first of all. And let's remind them about why it's so important that the way you do what you do is so important, Laura. There'll be a way that it's Desres legal. Okay, so there'll be a way that you do things that actually just makes the world a bit better for some people. Well, that's great. So remind them of that and talk to them about that and get them to articulate that. That's the first thing I do. I then get them root cause analysis, ask the question why 5 times around what is it that actually is causing the friction? Is it that they can't see it reducing? Is it that the pace is just, you know, there is only so much energy. You do need to have a bit of time to recoup, recharge, re-energize. So is it the fact that they just can't see that changing in the long term? Or actually, is it just that the pace is just too much and actually it might be okay for 6 months, but actually, you know, we have to get to 6 months. So how do we do that? How can we build in some breaks? So it's identifying which bit is making them question that they don't want to be in this industry. So why did they love it in the first place? And then in effect, what's wrong? You know, what is the real cause of the issue? And then I'd if you wanted to try and get that team to continue to be resilient in the organization, I'd try to get that issue, how can you improvise to solve that problem? So you might not be able to solve the problem with the stamp duty changing. That's something you can't control. But actually, is there something else you can control? So I'm just going to talk out loud here, and this might be an absolute rubbish idea, but you could think of, no idea would be rubbish, but, you know, would they as a team be prepared to take, say there's a team of 10, be prepared to take a 10% pay cut to get one more member of staff so they can all have an hour off every week. You know, that they might just need a break. And then it's finding really creative ways of giving them an ability to. Now, there's another problem about recruitment then. There's another problem about whether you can get the right type of staff and etc. But there will be potentially, once you find the root cause and you reminded them why they're in this business, why they love being in a legal conveyancing organisation, and why Desres is different, and the really, you know, fantastic work you're doing. Remind them of that. Remind them that what the actual root cause of the problem is. Can you control it? Yes or no? And if you can, right, let's solve that. What can we do about that problem in our business together? What are we prepared to do? Because at that point, you'll understand whether they really are at a point where they can't come back, or whether they're actually just starting on that. I just need it to end. I just need a bit of a break. I just need it to know that actually it's not going to be like this forever. Because, you know, if it's not a nice place, you know, it's not a nice place. You don't want to be in it for 3 years, do you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so someone I'm coaching at the moment is having a very similar feeling about their industry and their career. And one thing I'm saying to her at the moment is she's basically going to take a mini sabbatical of about a month off from her job.
Yeah.
And I've said to her, obviously that's great, but I think she needs to set very clear understanding of why she's taking that month off. Is it just a month off to breathe, which is fine, or is it a month in which she's going to go away and reassess her life in the light of the, you know, because I think I've done this before where I'm going to take a couple of weeks off, and I'm, you know, and then you take a couple of weeks off and I didn't really address the things I was going, and it's fine if that's what you wanted to do. If you just needed a breather, then fine. But I think for those who are looking to reassess, sometimes putting a limit on it, you know, because then you just get more burnt out. You keep going, going up, and it's, you know, I've been running businesses all my life, all my sort of adult life really, and sometimes you can be like, this isn't working for me. I need to either do something different or change something. And 2 years down the line, you're still doing it, and you're like, I need to make that decision.
And so bringing that point right, so you've got the sort of why I was in it in the first place, then you've got what is actually the root cause, what is the problem, and that might be different for a couple of different people, you know, depending on which ship they're in, which boat they're in. And then let's try and solve that. Is there some things we can do today? Is there some things the business can do today that will help? And that, you know, no bad idea. Think about that. What's the business prepared to do? It could be at that point then as you pointed out, you give people a sort of a time scale to say, well, actually, let's see if we can change those things. Let's see what we can change, and if we can change, great. And if we can't, that's another conversation to be having. But I like your point you were saying there about the problem solving bit for me is what you were just saying there. The thinking about what do I want to do about this. That's you need to be practical on that front.
Sure. Yeah, so Laura said, time to rebuild after a very difficult 15 months with a great team and need to refocus on that. It certainly sounds like it, Laura. I mean, you know, I think as much as anything, it just sounds like it's just been crazy busy. I think you've got a very different problem for a lot of businesses, and actually in some respects might be a good problem, but you've gone through that boom period and now time to reconsolidate and focus. So final question then is from Snezka. How do I keep my external consultants motivated when I am the one badly affected with the situation through complications? We've not been able to get vaccinated yet because of allergies, and despite being in a high risk group and therefore still having to shield and keep Zooming. So yeah, it sounds like Snezka's sort of really fatigued with Zoom and just obviously high risk. And I get that. That must be exhausting. I think we all experienced that anxiety in the early days when we didn't really know what the disease was and how, you know, and how careful we had to be. I know I'm a lot more relaxed about it now. I've been vaccinated once and blah, blah, blah. But so Snezka really is looking for ways to keep her consultants happy and motivated when she herself is the one. In other words, all those things you were talking about, it's very difficult for her to do because she's stressed and worried. You know, presenting that confident, upbeat front that you were talking about, being, you know, that must be very, very difficult. And again, having to do it all through Zoom. You know, so yeah. Any points for that?
Well, I did start by saying it starts with you. And if you're in a place where you're not feeling resilient, then working on that would be the first point I would say. Now, again, coming back to the outline we said at the beginning, you know, there are some things you can control and some things you can't. You know, so for I'm going to say the name wrong. Snezka, is that how you pronounce it? I do apologise if that's wrong. For Snezka, if you are feeling in that way, then working through those points yourself and making sure you can see how there is a way forward for you would be really important. You should always be authentic, and so I wouldn't expect you to do that blind optimism bit, because people will see through it. So if you really are struggling, then having some coaching, talking to somebody, having a mentor or a buddy that you can offload on yourself. Often we live on our own, for example. If we live on our own, for example, we're not in the office to be able to have a coffee with our mate. We've not been able to see our friends. So actually having somebody that you can trust and be psychologically safe with is important. Lots of people out there, Neil coach, I coach, they can be that person that you can explain those things to. That's the first thing. The second thing is actually looking at the good things that you've done. So what have you learned about yourself in the last 12 months? So it might all be going, forgive me, to hell in a handcart, but actually you will have learned something in the last 12 months about yourself. So you might have learned that actually you've got very little patience for people that moan about things. I've learned that I've become very impatient with people that just aren't getting on with it. You know, we've got to live with this thing, and actually, you know, we have to try to do our best, and we have to, you know, I've realised about myself last week. Lisa, who's on here, she'll tell you, she reads my weekly newsletter. I've learned that actually I like authority, but actually I don't like authority when they don't tell me the truth. So I want to make sure that if I think something's not quite right, I will make sure I say something about that. I will be strong. So even though I had a tough time last week, I learned something. So it ended up being a positive week. So take some coaching, think about what you've learned. It might be a pretty tough time, but there's a book by Susan Jeffers, which Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's all about fear, okay? But what she says in there about fear is that it's going to be constant. And fear happens when we put ourselves out of our comfort zone. At the moment, we've all been put out of our comfort zone because this is something none of us expected. And so we're all feeling a little bit uncomfortable. So acknowledge that. But actually, fear will ebb and flow because the more comfortable you come with your situation and accepting of your situation, not accepting so you don't do anything about it, but accepting where you are today, and that is different to where you want to be, accepting it, then putting a plan in place to change it, what you can change, that helps you grow because you become more comfortable and then the fear subsides. So in terms of yourself, Janeska, speak to somebody, try and figure out what you can control, try and figure out why you're frightened, and then from that point, build on the positives. What have you learned? And that's the point that then you talk to your consultants. Because if you're talking from that point, you will be positive because you've learned something and it's a good thing to think about.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that that sort of more accepting those things you can't control and just controlling that. There was something I came across the other day called the worry tree, which I think is used in sort of CBT, and you know, it's like just helps you identify the things you can control and things you can't control, and whether to do something about them.
Quickly on that point, really practical exercise. I've got a couple of clients that don't sleep. They worry about things and they don't sleep. So I get them to take a piece of paper, put a circle in the middle with the date on it, and then put lines off, okay, about what's going on in their head. This problem, this problem, this problem. And just get them to write everything down about the problem. Don't worry about what the page looks like, just write it all down. And then I get them to go around the circle again and say, can I do anything about it tonight at 10 o'clock or not? Yes or no? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Right. Things you can do something about, go and do them. Even if it's 10 o'clock at night, you're better off doing it, then you'll go to sleep. You can't do anything about the other stuff, so stop worrying about it, get some sleep, because tomorrow you need your energy to fix those things. So 95% of the things you worry about, never going to happen. The other 5% is going to happen. Don't worry about them happening. Spend your energy on fixing them. So find out what's going on in your head, write it all down. Can I do anything today or tomorrow about it? Yes or no? Put the action in what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. Put the pad by the side of your bed, go to bed.
That neatly wraps it up, brings it back to the first thing I said off the back of the thing, was about that, brought up that point you meant about control. You know, it's like identifying the things you can control, giving yourself a sense of agency about the things you can control. And again, whether that's for yourself or for your colleagues or your for your consultants. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nicola. Thank you for attending, everyone. We're going to wrap up there. We're a few minutes over time. There's so much to discuss, obviously. I think it's something that affects all of us in lots of different ways. Yes, yeah, Laura says she's looking forward to sleeping as well. Yeah, I think all of us, definitely all of our sleep patterns. Everyone's having crazy dreams over the last year, from what I can tell. So yeah, have a good day, everyone. You have mine and Nicola's contact details, but if, let me just very quickly, are you typing yours in, Nicola?
Yeah.
There we go. I'm going to type mine in the chat. So obviously, if you want to get in touch with either of us for whatever reason, please do. And yeah, what was I going to add? There's one last thing I was going to do is if you're not already on the newsletter, to find out when we send an email once a week with updates, and you can always forward this to colleagues. There we go, the link is in the chat. But otherwise, thank you, Nicola. You said you would forward the deck to me, and I'll make sure that gets circulated to everyone.
Yeah, no problem.
Other than that, thank you, everyone. Really enjoyed that session, and see you all soon. Cheers. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.